Hello, hello. Welcome, folks. Come on down. We are about to get started. I am searching for my colleague, Pratik, so I can upgrade him to a panelist. Pratik, are you there? I don't see him yet. Hmm. Oh, Pratik, you're you're showing up as Maureen McDowell. You use somebody else's link, Pratik. That's okay. I'm gonna promote you. Anyways, make this nice and confusing for everybody. All right, folks, hop in here and do me a favor. Jump into the chat and just let us know where you're from and what you do. Give us your location and give us, I'm an XYZ consultant. Let's get a conversation started here in the chat. Hey, Pratik.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, good. While you're doing that, let me quickly introduce myself and Pratik. My name is Ahmed Manawar. I'm the founder of Boutique Growth and the 90 Day Pipeline. I'm going to talk a little bit more about myself in a minute, not too much, I promise you. With me, I have Pratik Judah, who's updated his Zoom name, I think, now to Pratik. Yeah. So good.
I'm not Maureen
No,
anymore.
no longer Maureen, now Pratik. Pratik is an enrollment consultant at Boutique Growth. He's the guy that you want to talk to if you have any questions about working together and is there a fit and can we help you? And we'll talk a little bit more about how to have that conversation if you want to near the end of today's presentation. But that's Pratik's role. He'll be joining us here for the workshop, and you will likely be having a conversation with him after the fact at some point. I see a lot of folks introducing themselves in the chat. Thank you. I'd love to read all these out loud. We have a pretty packed house today. Candidly, more folks here than I was wouldn't say hoping for, but it's a larger group, and I like to keep these fairly interactive. So we're going to still attempt to keep this fairly interactive today, despite the size of the group. So a couple of housekeeping notes before we jump in. We have about 45 to, I'd say, 55 minutes of actual material to convey to you. And that's going to be the presentation workshop component of this. I'm going to make that interactive as we go, and I'll explain how that's going to work in a minute. I do have, after the top of the hour, 30 minutes blocked on my calendar to just do some open Q&A and discussion. So if you have the time, if you got to run at the top of the hour, by all means, we will get you the recording of the Q&A. If you can stay after the top of the hour just to have a discussion, ask some questions, and get some more clarity, I'm more than happy to stay for another half an hour afterwards to get that conversation going with you. What we're going to do here today is I'm going to give you a framework. Okay, this is the power positioning framework. It's a 5-part framework. I'll talk a little bit more about where this came from and how we developed it. But I'm going to give you a framework today. And the focus of today is for you to understand how the framework works, what the individual pieces are, how it fits together, how you can use it in your business. And what's really critical for me today is for you to walk away with a clear grasp and understanding of the framework. And what's going to facilitate that more than anything else is your questions. So I do not want to talk at you. I do not want to present at you. I want to make sure we're having a conversation here. So as we go through the material, I will be checking in regularly to make sure that everything is clear. You understand what we're saying, you understand how to use the information, and you're good to go. So as we go through it, what I encourage you to do is ask questions. For the sake of organization, there is a Q&A box. Do you see it there, Pratik? Pretty sure it's there.
Yeah? I do. Yep.
Yeah. Do you folks just let me know in the chat? Do you see the Q&A box on Zoom? Just give me a yes if you see it. Perfect. Yeah. So for the sake of we'll keep the chat separate from the questions. If you want to jump in the chat and make a comment, by all means, make a comment, and I'll be asking you to comment on things as we go. If you have a question about the material that we go through and you want some clarity on the material in that we're discussing, drop that question into the Q&A box. Pratik, I'm going to ask you to kind of manage the Q&A box for me, and we'll check in with you at every step of the way here to see if there's any questions to clear up before we move on to the next step.
Sure.
That sound good, folks? Any questions at this stage before we jump in? Got my coffee. Will the presentation be shared, Sanjay? Probably not, but the recording will be shared. Okay. All right. So let's talk about positioning. Power positioning is the framework I want to share with you today. It's a 5-part framework that you can use to win more deals, charge premium prices, and differentiate yourself from the competition. Quick overview of what we're going to cover today. I'm going to have a discussion on the front end here about why positioning matters. Why are we talking about this, seemingly abstract concept of positioning? Why is this an important topic to have a discussion on? Why are we covering it? And why can't I go back on my slides? Was my next question. Huh. That's odd. Okay. Uno momente. While I troubleshoot why I can't go back on my slides. Okay, let's try that again. So this is the agenda today. We're going to talk about positioning as a topic, why it's important. I'm going to share with you the framework. The meat of this today is the 5 cornerstones of power positioning, that framework. And then we'll do some, if we have time, I might share some case studies, but really I want to spend some time in open Q&A. And I'm going to give you, by the way, at the end of this, I'm going to give you an opportunity to have Pratik and I both review your positioning strategy specifically on a 2-part consultation. So we'll talk about how that works. Just as a heads up, if you want to take today's material and you want to get our feedback on your positioning, there is a process by which we can do that for you by virtue of being on this workshop. That's going to be part of the process. And we'll talk about how to take advantage of that opportunity at the end of the presentation today. So that's our agenda. Okay. I don't want to talk much about myself because that's not what you're here to hear about, but I do want to articulate to you why you might want to pay attention to what I'm saying. Our flagship program is called the 90-Day Pipeline. 90-Day Pipeline launched in about July of 2018. And in that time, we're going on 6 years and a bit now. We have graduated over 1,000 B2B consultants and professional service providers. There aren't many organizations, if any, that have generated that kind of volume of work in the B2B consulting professional services space. What that's done, and the reason why I share that with you, is it's offered us a perspective. What I'm going to share with you today in terms of the framework, power positioning, is not something that, I drew on the back of a napkin yesterday and said, let's take this to the market and see what people think. This is a battle-tested framework that over 1,000 B2B consultants just like you have used with a tremendous degree of success. We have hundreds of successful case study clients and testimonials. And I will tell you, clients who graduate from that 90-day pipeline consistently say that one of the most transformative parts of the process was the power positioning mindset and framework. And that's what I'm going to share with you today. This is something that is battle tested, proven across every single B2B consulting vertical that you can think of, including yours. Okay. So I wanted to share with you to start off, here's some of what we heard from you. So in your intake form, we asked you, what's your biggest challenge right now in the business? And I want to just go through some of that here so that, potentially if you might connect with some of these ideas in addition to the specific reasons you brought to us. What we heard is, I need a concise positioning so potential clients can better understand what I do and why I charge a premium rate. This is about articulating what you do and justifying a premium. That is absolutely a benefit of the positioning exercise. We said folks are struggling to articulate their unique value and position themselves as go-to experts. Value is not enough. And that's going to be a theme we're going to come back to over and over and over again. Value is not enough. Having a value proposition is not enough. You've got to be unique in your value proposition to stand out in today's market. Folks said, making my market problem aware in a language that resonates with them. What is the language I need to use to connect with my target audience? The more generic you are, the less you're going to connect. The more specific you are in your language, the more you're going to connect. Folks said they have difficulty clearly defining differentiators and creating accurate, effective market messaging. How are you different? But different's not the goal. Difference important, but difference not the goal. You got to be different in a way that the market actually cares about and in a way that carries some advantage to the market. So we'll talk about differentiation. Folks said they're facing positioning challenges when transitioning from hourly contractor work to higher value consulting services. This is a major transition a lot of folks have to go through is how do I go from charging hourly kind of pair of hands type work to charging for higher value, more expensive consulting services where I'm the brain, not the pair of hands. How do I position myself for that higher value, high fee work? Folks said they're struggling to effectively position themselves to new clients outside their network of referrals. So, positioning is frankly less of an important exercise when you generate all of your business from your network and from referrals, because you're talking to people who already know who you are, like you, and trust you. So it's not as important when we go to the cold market, when you have to break out of the network that you have and start talking to new prospects who don't know who you are. They don't know you from a can of paint, right? Now it becomes really important to be deliberate about how you position yourself in the market in front of those prospective clients who don't know you. And folks said that we have difficulty demonstrating tangible value without an established track record, especially when offering newer complex services. So maybe you're new to the game, new to consulting, new to a marketplace, or you have a new offer. How do I demonstrate value without, 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 case studies to demonstrate the value of my work? So these are some of the things we're going to talk about today, and that the positioning framework is going to certainly aid you in approaching. Is there anything here I'm missing is my first question. You can drop this in the chat. Anything here that you want to take away from this workshop that we haven't covered? Drop a note in the chat while I take a sip of coffee. Anything jumping out to you? Pratik, by the way, Pratik has, I'd say 25 to 40 conversations a week with B2B consultants who are looking for help. So also has a really interesting perspective through those conversations. Anything jumping out to you, Pratik, that we haven't talked about here?
I think everything here, covers it for the most part. It always comes back to that differentiation piece and how are they positioned differently in the marketplace. And in the voice of customers, what we always get to in the conversations when I'm talking to people, right? So expert frame versus the customer frame.
Fantastic. So a couple of things here coming up in the chat. Thank you, Pratik. Sonia is saying your thoughts on pricing. We will talk about pricing. We'll probably allude to pricing, but Sonia, if you want to have a more explicit conversation about that at the end in the Q&A, please bring that up. Rusty's saying leveraging the LinkedIn platform to do that. So we are not going to have a conversation about LinkedIn today. LinkedIn is a tactic. Okay. It's a tactical platform, and there are things that you can do on LinkedIn. If you don't have our free course, LinkedIn Leverage, can I just get a show of hands here? Who does not have our free LinkedIn Leverage course? Just put it in the chat here. Who does not? Okay. I got hands up. Okay. Pratik, can you go ahead and grab not the direct page, but the opt-in page for the LinkedIn Leverage course that people can use to drop their email in and then get access to the course? We have a whole course on how to apply power positioning, which we're going to talk about today, and actually make that work on LinkedIn from a lead generation perspective. So we have a separate course on that. There's about 3 to 4 hours worth of material on that. Pratik will drop a link to you folks in the chat here for that course. Today, I want to focus on the strategy that is power positioning. And that course will give you a lot of the how-tos and the tactical things that you need to do on LinkedIn to make it work. Okay, but I'm glad you brought that up. You good, Pratik? Awesome. All right, let's talk about why positioning. Okay. Couple of graphs here you probably remember from Economics 101. Whether that was in high school, college, whatever it may be, at some point you probably got an education in economics. And if you didn't, you're going to get it now. Okay. Central theory in economics is the theory of supply and demand. And the idea here is that in every market, you have a supply curve. Okay, that's the blue curve here. And you have a demand curve. That is the red curve. The supply curve represents you, the sellers, the people are delivering services. And the demand curve represents your clients, the buyers, the people who want to buy services. Okay. And the important thing to understand about supply and demand is that at the intersection of the supply curve, that is what sellers are available to deliver, and the demand curve, that is what buyers want to buy, at the intersection is where price and quantity is set. And the important thing to understand about this is in every market, there is a price equilibrium. Okay. There is a price equilibrium, and that is driven by how much demand is there for services and how much supply is there for services. Okay. So think about, to use a simple example, think about OPEC, right? OPEC being the oil consortium of oil producing nations. When OPEC wants the price of oil to go up, what do? They restrict production. They drop supply. Because when there's less oil available, it becomes more scarce and the price goes up. And when OPEC wants the price of oil to go down, they produce more oil. Okay. And seemingly an irrelevant example, but it does highlight what we're trying to do here with power positioning, because all things considered, you don't have a lot of influence over the demand curve in your market. The only input you have there is choosing a market, which we're going to talk about. That's a critical step here. You want to choose a market that's got healthy demand for services. Beyond that, you can't create customers. You can't create demand. You can't drive how much demand there is for your services. That's not something you can control. That's a broader macroeconomic phenomenon. So you don't have much influence or input over the demand curve. What you can play with is the supply curve. Because this supply curve kind of assumes that every provider here on the supply curve is largely interchangeable. There's a certain amount of supply that can be mixed and matched. And based on that, a price is set. But what if you were differentiated from other options available to your clients in the marketplace? What if you couldn't be charted on this supply curve? What if you were clearly different from all the other options available, and you had your own supply curve here? We kind of shift things to the left. Well, observe what happens when we restrict supply. Again, think about OPEC, the oil producing consortium. When they contract supply, when they produce less oil, the price goes up. So OPEC controls the price by restricting production or increasing production if they want to. And the big idea I want you to take away from this is you have the opportunity to create power in this transaction, to influence price in this transaction. And you do that by separating from the traditional supply curve. You do that by differentiating yourself from all the other firms, vendors, suppliers, consultants available to your ideal client, so that they can't put you in the same camp. They can't lump you in with everybody else, because what you do is materially different. And when you do that, that's what puts the power in power positioning. The big idea behind power positioning is the following. Traditionally consultants, and if this is you, don't feel bad. This is traditionally how people think. They go to the market on the assumption that they need clients and clients don't need them. So they go and they offer services and they look and sound like everybody else. And when the client says this is too expensive, then the consultant says, okay, well, I can do it for cheaper. Here's a discount. And the client negotiates and the client bends over backwards to try to get the deal, because you need the deal. And the client knows that they don't need you. If they don't hire you, they'll go down the list and hire somebody else. That's in the context of generalized consultants that are not differentiated. But what happens is when you're differentiated and you can't be compared to other folks in the marketplace, there's no comparison to be made because you're materially and clearly different from other folks. You take back some of that power. And our goal with our clients inside 90-Day Pipeline is that we want them to go from the place where clients need them, rather to go from they need clients to clients need them. You want to get to a point where you are so well positioned in your market that you have lots of clients you can work with. So you don't need any one particular client, but they don't have any options to choose from. And you're seemingly the best option for them. And that's where we take back some power. So this is fundamentally about playing with the laws of supply and demand. Now, I want to make this really concrete for you. If you're, mathematically inclined or not, this will help. Here's a really simple framework, formula even, to think about your positioning. Power positioning equals client confidence divided by available alternatives. Okay. I want to make sure this is really clear. Client confidence divided by available alternatives. This is the calculation, the formula that drives how much power you have in your marketplace. This is the measure of power. Okay. Starting with, the numerator here, client confidence. Do they believe that you're going to be able to get them results? Do they have confidence in you as a consultant, as an expert, as a service provider to get them results? That's the basis of this. Without belief in your ability to get them results or confidence in your ability to get them results, you have no power. That's a non-starter. Okay. That's the basis. However, that's not the full picture. We have to discount that confidence by the number of available alternatives. So if the client perceives that there are 10 available alternatives to working with you, then we divide their confidence by 10. If the client perceives there are 3 viable alternatives to working with you, we divide it by 3, and so on and so forth. So you can see how this works. We want to maximize the amount of confidence your marketplace, your prospective client has in working with you. They feel very confident that you're the right choice. You'll get them results. But we want to do so in a way that minimizes the available alternatives, that they also can't really see very many other options to working with you. Okay. I'll give you an example of this quick story that hopefully will make this real for you. We had a client, his name was Dr. Arlen Ward. Dr. Arlen Ward is in the medical device space, and his service is a computer simulation service for medical device firms. And Arlen told me the story while we were working together and working on his positioning. He put a proposal in front of a client, and it was a healthy, 6-figure proposal, probably low 6 figures, 100K, 200K, something like that. Okay. And this is back in the day when people used to meet in person for proposals. It still happens sometimes, right? And the client's got the proposal in front of them, and they're looking at the number, and they go, Arlen, this is very expensive. And Arlen says, yes, I understand. And they're thinking about it, and they're mulling it over, and they go, but Arlen, we really need to do this. Like, this is important. This is an important project for us. And Arlen says, yeah, I agree. It's mission critical for your objectives. Absolutely. And they're thinking about it, and they go, Arlen, I don't really know who else we can go to for this. Like, I don't know who else we can go to for help. I mean, you're clearly positioned to do this work. I don't know where else to look. And then Arlen goes, well, yeah, it's hard to find good help. I understand. And the client says, well, I guess we better get started. Okay. This is power positioning in a live deal-making environment. What happens is the client has confidence in you and your ability to get them results. The project is important. The goal is important. The outcome is important. The results are important to them. And they know you can deliver, and they don't know where else to go to get this kind of help. Any, rational, reasonable client is going to proceed to work with you and pay what you're worth, pay your premium happily. Okay. I'm going to get into the framework now, but I want to make sure y'all are tracking me at this stage. Any questions so far? Anything that needs to be clarified? And if you're tracking me, just give me a yes in the chat. This is all making sense so far. Perfect. Any questions in the chat in the Q&A box there, Pratik?
Not in the Q&A box, but a couple got dropped a little bit before you got into this slide around positioning in multiple different segments, different audiences in that sense. So is there multiple positionings essentially?
Okay. Flag that one, and we'll come back to it in the Q&A because I think the framework itself will address that. Okay. All right. So I want to give you guys the framework now. So this is the meat of today's conversation. It's a 5-part framework on power positioning. Okay. We're going to go through it one step at a time, starting with the foundations, and we're going to work our way up. And I'm going to stop at each step to answer any questions, make sure this is clear. Okay. Now, disclaimer, these slides were made a few years ago, and the person that made the slides spelled clarity wrong. As you can see here on the bottom right corner. And I thought about changing it, but I always get a good laugh out of the typo and my unwillingness to fix it. So we're all going to laugh at clarity is spelled wrong, and then we're going to move past it, right? Client clarity is spelled wrong. The first piece here is what we call client clarity. What is client clarity? Client clarity is about getting as narrow and specific about your target market as humanly possible without taking on undue risk. One more time. We want to get as narrow and specific about your target market as possible without taking on undue risk. What does that mean? Get as narrow as you can, but don't be foolish about it. And don't be foolish about it means don't get so specific that you specify yourself out of a market, right? We still want to choose markets that are big, where there's lots of opportunity, lots of clients to help. And we want to get as narrow and specific as we can within those markets, but not get so specific that you have a market of 5 clients or 10 organizations or even 20 to 30 organizations. I would argue is too specific. And we can get into what is too specific. I'm happy to answer that question. But as a general principle, we want to get narrow and specific about your target market without taking on undue risk by getting overly specific such that the market size becomes too small. Okay. Good rule of thumb. Good rule of thumb is you want to be able to point to your target market and see anywhere from 1,000 organizations and up. I'd say 1,000 to 10,000 is a good rule of thumb. Less than 1,000, and you start to wonder. I mean, if it's just a few hundred companies, well, how many of those companies can I reasonably engage and capture? And if it's more than 10,000, then you start to wonder, well, am I being specific enough? Because, unless your goal is to become $100 million organization or $1 billion organization, which is generally not the case for most of you, you're trying to build a consulting practice that's what, $300,000-$400,000 a year as a solo, maybe $500,000 a year as a solo, a boutique firm at, $1.5 million, $2 million, $3 million. Some of you might want to grow to $5-10 million. That's generally, the extent of a lot of folks' aspirations in this space. Anybody choosing to go beyond that would be very much the exception. Well, you don't need a market of 10,000 clients to do a few million dollars a year. You need a small handful of really, really good clients that see high value in the work that you do. So that's a good rule of thumb in terms of how to choose, a market size. Now, the key here with client clarity, and this is a really important point I want you to take away, is you need to choose a market that can self-identify as being in your market. Okay, choose a market that can self-identify as being in your market. I'll give you a couple of examples. So we obviously target B2B consultants. Okay, we've made that clear at every level of this interaction in this workshop and our other material. This is for B2B consultants. Therefore, this is not for software companies, product companies, e-commerce companies, other commoditized services. This is for high value, high fee B2B consultants. And I would wager, and you could disagree with me on this, I probably wouldn't believe you to be candid, but one of the reasons you're here is because we explicitly target B2B consultants. And we speak the language of B2B consultants. And you are interested and intrigued by the fact that we have something here that's materially for B2B consultants, which is what you self-identify as. Okay. I'll give you another example. I interviewed a former client yesterday. I was telling Pratik about this morning. This is a client that worked with us in the earlier days, back in 2020, 2021, I believe. And we hadn't talked in a few years. Okay. And this client, and this interview will go live on Consulting Mastery, our podcast. Oh, by the way, folks, if you're not listening to Consulting Mastery, Pratik, can I ask you to drop a link to that as well? Did you drop the LinkedIn leverage link yet?
I did.
Oh, you did. Yeah.
I'll do both.
Yeah. Drop a link to Consulting Mastery, the podcast. That's definitely worth listening to, folks. This interview I'm referring to will go live on that podcast probably in the next month or so. But this is a client who went into the marketing services space, and they worked with us way back when they were first starting their business. There's 2 of them, Brent and his partner. And these are both, they had left very high ranking positions at Bank of America in the digital marketing department. Okay. And they came to us and we were helping them as part of the 90-day pipeline identify their ideal client, their target market. And they were trying to be generalists. They were trying to approach 5, 6, 7 different markets. And I had a conversation with them. I remember the conversation, even though it's years ago. I said, well, you guys are like 2 of the top ranking people at Bank of America in digital marketing. don't you think that kind of specialization and that kind of experience and gravitas in financial services might warrant a focus in financial services? Don't you think other banks and credit unions and fintech firms would find your experience and credentials in financial services relevant and material? Well, guess what happened? Oh, Pratik, you're only dropping those links to the host and panelists. You've got to drop those to everybody. Yeah. Thank you, Charlotte, for pointing that out. You got to click on the two and then click on everyone. You see that there?
Yeah, I've only got access to hosts and panelists and you.
Okay. I'm doing that here.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, folks. You know what? Let me do this. Pratik, I'm making you a co-host, then you'll be able to do it.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry for the interruption. So what did they do? They ended up focusing on financial services. And in my conversation with Brent yesterday, what he told me was that initial focus, and well, that's still their focus, that their focus on financial services enabled their first few deals and enabled the growth that they experienced, which was they did $1.5 million in revenue in their first 18 months. And this year, 2024, which I believe would be either their third or their fourth year in business, they will close $2 million in sales. And according to Brent, no surprise to me, but I want to make sure it's clear to you, that was driven by their focus in financial services. Arguably getting to the first million was driven by that. Beyond that, I think they've also decided to pursue other markets. But the point is that clients want to work with consultants who can demonstrate an understanding of their particular context. This is the big idea. Clients want to work with consultants who can demonstrate an understanding of their context. If you decide to work with us inside Boutique Growth or 90-Day Pipeline, you're going to do so, among other reasons, because we get B2B consulting. We've graduated over 1,000 B2B consultants through our programs. We understand this space inside out. That's going to be a key driver for you. And the same is true for your clients. When they decide to work with you, they're going to do so because you have somehow demonstrated that you get them. You get their space. You get their context. You get the challenges. You get the specific circumstances. And this is why getting as narrow and specific as possible on your target market is so important, because it's really hard to claim that you know every market. Like, the truth is, I don't know anything about SaaS. I don't know anything about e-commerce. I don't know anything about, technology service. Like, I don't know these other things. I know my little world of B2B consulting and marketing and business development within that. And I don't know much else. That's very believable. Like, you can believe me when I say that. If I claim to be, the marketing expert for everybody, if I claim to understand marketing, any type of product, any type of service in any type of market, you simply wouldn't believe me. And my positioning would crumble right from the beginning. Does that make sense? Questions here. We're going to build on this now, but this is the base of the entire strategy here is client clarity. Any questions about client clarity? Okay. I'm going to keep going. We'll come back to it if we get some more questions. I have an example here. So this is a fictitious example. And the story is it's a story of a consultant named Jody. Jody is a customer experience consultant, customer success consultant. She can help clients with their customer experience, improving retention, making their product stickier, so on and so forth, right? So Jody is like, well, I could pick a target market. I really have pretty broad-based experience in customer success and customer experience. But you know what? One of my more formative experiences as an employee and where I really got some interesting results was when I was working for a B2B SaaS company as their head of customer experience. And that company was, in that kind of $1 to $5 million ARR, annual recurring revenue range. And we really got some interesting results with that company. And that was a formative experience for me. So I'm going to go and instead of trying to be, the customer experience consultant for all organizations, I don't know how to do that, by the way, right? But instead of doing that, I'm going to try to position myself specifically for B2B SaaS companies between $1 and $5 million in annual recurring revenue. That's the decision that Jody made to get as narrow and specific as possible while still targeting a big market. Like that market, B2B SaaS, 1 to 5 million, that is a big market. There's lots of organizations in that space, but it's specific enough to enable some really powerful positioning, which we're going to get to. Okay. The second piece of this framework is what we call problem specificity. Problem specificity. So, just as it's hard for me to believe as a client that you understand every market, that you understand every context, it's also equally hard to believe that you're an expert at everything. And this is where, you know, the traditional management consulting methodology really falls flat on its face. Okay. Because you could be a management consultant at McKinsey and Bain and Ernst & Young and Deloitte, you know, and I've worked at these firms, Ernst & Young in particular. Like you can be a generalist at these firms. You could be a management consultant who says, well, I can solve any kind of problem for any type of organization. And you can get away with that when you work at McKinsey and Bain and Deloitte and Ernst & Young, because they have these huge brand names and they don't really need you to be their marketer because they have clients coming to them and establish relationships. Outside of those big brand names, and even they're more specialized, I'm giving them credit for, nobody wants to hire a management consultant. You know, no client ever woke up in the morning and said, I want to hire a management consultant. I promise you this. No client ever woke up in the morning and even said, today I'm going to hire a consultant. It is not on their agenda to hire a consultant. It is not their desire to hire a consultant. In fact, hiring a consultant is usually done begrudgingly, hesitatingly, when I have to do it. Okay. What they do wake up in the morning thinking about is their problems. Okay. What does occupy their mind space? What they do go, you know, from meeting to meeting at work thinking about, what they do go home after work thinking about, what they do take to bed with them is the very material, specific, and urgent challenges they're facing in their business, in their role, in their department today. That's what they're thinking about. Not you, not, oh, I really need a management consultant. I really need an XYZ consultant, but their problems. And so this is the key to getting attention in your market. Okay. You go on LinkedIn, and I will wager this is true for 75% of you, unless you've already been through our LinkedIn leverage course, then that doesn't count. But I will wager this is true for 75% of you. There's 40 of you in this room. This is probably true for 30 of you at least. And I think I'm being conservative. If I go to your LinkedIn profile right now, what I'm going to find is a whole lot of information about you. I am this, I'm a seasoned that, I've got a few decades of this, I'm an expert in that, I've worked with these clients, I've done this, I've done that. And nowhere am I likely going to find, maybe you're the exception, but nowhere am I likely going to find an articulation of the problem that you solve for clients in a way that is compelling to the clients that you serve. And this is the heart of why you're getting no attention. Because they don't care about you. And don't feel bad. You don't care about me either. That's okay. I'm not offended. You don't care about me. You only care about me to the extent that I might have some solutions to the problems that you're facing. That's why you might care. But you're not here because you think Ahmed's an interesting guy. I'm not that interesting. Spoiler alert. Right? That's why you're here. I hate to disappoint you. But that's not why you're here. You're here because you have problems that you're facing in your business. And we have communicated to you that we have solutions to those problems. And that's what got your attention. And that's why you're here. And your clients are exactly the same. They're not going to read your LinkedIn profile as a glorified resume and go, well, so-and-so has a couple of decades of experience in this space. We should probably have a conversation with him. Wouldn't that be nice? That's not how the real world works. They want to see that you can clearly articulate to them the problems that they're facing in language that's better than they would use. You know, what I hear from my market, what Pratik hears from us, from you folks, is that, you know, we do a better job of articulating some of the problems and the pains that you're experiencing that you could even articulate yourself. Now think about what that does. That builds trust. Because how could we possibly know so intimately what you're going through? How could we have such a nuanced understanding of your problems and your challenges and your pains and your circumstances if we hadn't helped other folks who are just like you overcome the same problems? It immediately makes you feel like these guys know what they're doing. I can trust them. And so this is the importance of getting very specific about the problem that you solve. Because again, no client is going to believe that you are a bona fide world-class expert at solving 20 problems. Okay. And this is the critical issue with having a menu of services. And listen, I've been down this road. One of my formative experiences in my career was working for a consulting firm that, we had a target market. We worked in the education sector. So there was some client clarity. It wasn't completely random. But within that, we would basically try to be all things to all people. And I remember going to meetings with the CEO. Remember going to meetings, and the client would say, well, and we got a lot of those meetings from relationships and introductions. And the client would say, well, can you help us with this? And we go, of course we can. Absolutely. Well, what about this? Yeah, we can do that too. And what about the other? Let's throw it in there. And really quickly, this firm became, our work became like a dog's breakfast of a track record. There was nothing really clear that brought everything together. We were doing random projects for random clients. And yes, you can make a living doing that. It becomes a real grind after a while, though, because there's no clear reason why clients should hire you. There's no clear position here. You just do interesting things for interesting clients. I can't market that. You can't sell that. We can't promote that you're a good consultant. What does that even mean? What we can promote is that you're an expert at solving a specific problem for a specific type of client. We are experts at solving marketing and pipeline problems for B2B consultants. That can be marketed. I'm good at marketing, cannot be marketed effectively. Are we tracking? Let's check in. Give me a yay in the chat if this is making sense. Give me a question in the Q&A box if you got one. Okay. Okay. Pratik, good to go?
Yeah, I wanted to add something. Something that I get on in conversations with is after we have this conversation around positioning and problem specificity, sometimes there's a sense of fear of missing out on other opportunity and other types of problems that a consultant can solve. Not sure if this is the space to have that question addressed or.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're thinking, well, am I not going to miss out on other opportunity? I'm going to both validate your concern and hopefully address it. Okay. Yes, you're going to miss out on another opportunity. You will miss out on other opportunity. Yes. Capital yes. Capital Y. Okay. And you're thinking, well, that doesn't really help me, Ahmed. Now I'm even more concerned. What's your point? You will miss out on other opportunity, but the upside of it is you will generate sufficient opportunity within the direction that you want to pursue. Okay. Because and this is a really, really important point, folks. Today's market is a very different market. We started in this space 90 day. I mean, I've been consulting in this space for the better part of 10, 12 years. Okay. 90-day pipeline launched about 6 years ago. But, in the past 10 years, the market's changed considerably. And for you, what I mean by that is there are way more competitors today in every B2B consulting vertical than there were even 5 or 6 years ago. COVID was a big part of that. Okay. A lot of folks started working from home and they realized, I don't want to go back into the office. Maybe I should be a consultant. That was great for my business, bit of a challenge for you. More competition. Some of you are here because of that. So you know what I'm talking about. Layoffs and the employment crisis right now in the US is another major driver. Folks are not getting jobs. And a lot of them now are looking to consulting to replace their income because either they don't want jobs or they can't get jobs. Again, a lot of you might be in that position. Great for my business. a challenge for consultants because there's more competition. What's my point? It is no longer a viable strategy to be non-committal about the target market that you pursue and the problem that you solve. You could have gotten away with that 5, 6, 7, 10 years ago. You could have there was less competition. LinkedIn was less noisy. You could get more attention. Maybe it still wasn't a good strategy. Maybe you can get away with it. Today, if you don't commit to an audience and a problem and stake your name and your reputation on solving that problem for that audience, you are invisible. I'm not saying you can't get business from your network. I'm not saying you can't go and ask for referrals and beg your network for meetings and beg for introductions and try to squeeze as much revenue as you can out of a very fixed network of people. Yeah, if that's the path you want to pursue, sure. If you want to grow a thriving consulting business that's not reliant upon the size of your current network and doesn't require you to go to them essentially begging for business, and you're going to have to make some commitments here around target market and problem specificity so that strangers can start to understand and contextualize who you are and why they should care. If you're broad and generic, they can't figure out what you're about. And, I said we wouldn't talk about LinkedIn, but I'll use it as an example. If your LinkedIn profile doesn't immediately grab me and communicate to me that you work with clients like me and you solve a problem that I'm materially facing right now, you are invisible to me. I'm not even going to give you 3 seconds of attention if you can't grab me right away with, am I in the right place? And do you solve a problem that I have? So I understand the fear. However, the real concern, the bigger fear ought to be, how am I going to win business if I can't demonstrate relevance to anybody? Does that make sense? Pratik, any additional notes on that?
I mean, it was well said. I think it's front loading that relevance, that time and the place, the articulation of that time and place that really triggers a need for, that expertise. There's 2 questions that we got. Maybe they're relevant in this context here. We got one from Kendra. How do we confirm that we describe the problem in the language that resonates with the ideal client? That's the first question.
Okay. So actually, I want to be respectful of time in case folks have to jump at the top of the hour. I'm going to power through the framework. And then for the folks who can stay for Q&A, we'll hit all the questions afterwards. Okay. So let's work with our example here in Jody, right? Jody, as we recall, decided to focus on B2B SaaS, $1 to $5 million in annual recurring revenue. And Jody's expertise, as we mentioned, is customer experience, customer success. And what Jody found when she went to her market and had conversations with folks in this B2B SaaS space between $1 and $5 million in revenue, what she found is that the thing that they were really concerned about, the pain that her market was experiencing, was around this very specific metric of customer churn. They were churning more than they would like to churn. And they were churning and losing customers, above an industry benchmark. Okay. And that was a real concern. And this is a big concern for these folks because it's hard for them to go and, first of all, out acquire their churn. If they have higher churn, they've got to acquire more customers. And that becomes a kind of a race to the bottom because they can acquire more. But if their churn's got to, if there's a hole at the bottom of the bucket, you get churn, it's like a never ending grind, right? Acquire more, but churn more, acquire more, churn more. So the revenue is stagnating because of the churn. And that made it hard for them to go out and close another round of funding because they're stuck at a certain revenue level and their investors want to see certain milestones get hit and they're not hitting those milestones because of churn. It's a big problem for them. It's an urgent problem for them. It's a specific problem for them. And it's an expensive problem for them. Revenue's on the table and funding's on the table. So for all these reasons, Jody chooses to focus on customer churn. She could focus on all kinds of problems, but this is the one thing that she heard from her market that they were concerned about now. And therefore she chose to focus on that specific problem. Okay, let's keep going. The third piece of this puzzle here is what we call a point of view. Okay. So up until now, we know who we're talking to. We have client clarity. We have a clear, specific, and narrow focus of the audience that we want to serve. We know what problem that they're facing that we can solve. We have problem specificity. We've named the problem. We can point to it. We can articulate the consequences of facing that problem and not solving it. Now, any consultant worth their salt needs to be able to articulate an opinion. It's not enough to say, well, I can help you solve that problem. Prove it. Claims are easy. And that's another thing that's changed in this market is as consulting services gets more crowded within each consulting vertical, it's gotten more crowded. You know, maybe there was a time where you could say, well, I can solve your customer churn problem if you're a B2B SaaS company. And that was sufficient to get the market's attention and to win some deals, maybe. But when you have 20 other consultants saying the same thing, what happens is the market takes a blind eye to those claims. Those claims no longer compute. Those claims no longer register. Those claims no longer get their attention. Let's take an example that's probably going to be illustrated to all of you. If I just said to you, well, I can help you generate leads for your consulting firm, is that sufficient? Tell me in the chat. If I said I can help you generate leads for your consulting business, would that be sufficient for you to transact with me? Tell me in the chat, yes or no. I can help you generate leads for your consulting firm. Are we doing business? Yeah. Thank you, Dave. Me and 1,000 other people. Who isn't saying that? Right? Everybody's claiming to be able to solve that problem. Okay. And the question becomes, and this is how we're going to further differentiate you from the folks in your market, is what's your point of view? What's your take? What's your opinion? Can you, and this is a test of your expertise. Can you communicate to me a coherent, cogent point of view on why I'm facing this problem to begin with, and why the problem exists, and why it continues to exist, and why I haven't been able to solve it? Do you have a take on that? Because if you don't, it doesn't really give me a lot of confidence that you can solve it. But if you do, and if your take makes sense, it's logical, it resonates with me, I tend to agree with your perspective, well, now I'm really curious what you got. Now I'm really curious how you can solve it. So let's use us as an example. What's my point of view on your client clarity, B2B consultants? Problem specificity, need leads in pipeline. What's my point of view on that problem? In 3 words, positioning over prospecting. My point of view is you can't go to LinkedIn and treat this like a tactical problem and hope that it'll rain leads overnight. Plenty of people have tried that before. Plenty of people are in your inbox right now trying to tell you that it's some kind of LinkedIn problem. Press these buttons, run these campaigns, use this automation, use this banner image, hack the algorithm, and all of a sudden you'll generate leads. And it's complete nonsense. It is a lie. And they should be ashamed of themselves, okay? They're lying through their teeth. Because the truth is, and this is my position, which I believe to be the truth, our point of view is, if you don't nail the underlying positioning of your business, obviously this is the topic of today's conversation, if you don't nail the underlying positioning of your business, LinkedIn's not going to do anything for you. I don't care how good you are at the tactics. I don't care how good you are at outreach. I don't care how great your content is. If the positioning of your business is not sound, the tactics will not help you. To put it another way, LinkedIn is ultimately a megaphone. And if you don't have a strategy for who you're talking to and what you're going to say through that megaphone, LinkedIn's not going to do anything. You can yell and scream all you want. You're just noise, contributing to more noise. So that's my point of view. The question that you need to consider and reflect on is, what's yours? What is your perspective, take, point of view, opinion on the problems that your market and your customers are facing that you can articulate in a way that builds trust? Now, you'll notice my point of view is relatively polarizing. by virtue of you being in this room, I know you agree because you're in a workshop on power positioning. And look at what we did there. What did I do? In conducting this workshop is I attracted a bunch of people who are aligned with my point of view. That makes good business sense, doesn't it? But for all of you, there's 40 of you in here. I got another few thousand probably on my email list and on my LinkedIn network who are not particularly resonating with my point of view. And that's fine. They're not my clients. We wouldn't work well together. So the point of view becomes a form of attraction and repulsion. It becomes a polarizing message that we're deliberately putting out into the market to attract the people who are aligned with your thinking and your philosophy and your values and repel the folks who are not. And again, this workshop's kind of a live demonstration of how that works. Okay, let's go to Jody. Jody's point of view on her customer's problem of B2B SaaS companies with a customer churn problem. What she found is most of these organizations are assuming that their customer churn is a product problem. And all the attempts that they've made in the past to solve this problem have been changes to the product. So they go to engineering and they go, add this feature, do this, do that, change your product in this way, thinking that changing the product itself will improve retention and reduce churn. And Jody's perspective on this is it's not the product at all. It's the messaging around the product. If we change the messaging around the product, we improve usability, we get them more buy-in and desire to use the product, they'll use it more, even if it's the same product. So you can tell that's kind of disruptive. It's going to attract people that maybe see some relevance in that message and repel the ones who are convinced it's merely an engineering problem. It's making sense so far? Quick check-in in the chat. Everybody with me? That's my way of buying time so I can drink water. Yelling about positioning for an hour makes you thirsty. Believe it or not. Good. All right. We're bringing it home, folks. We're almost there, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. Appreciate all of you for hanging out and giving us your attention today. So we know who we're talking to. We got client clarity. We know what problem we're solving. We got problem specificity. We have a take. We have a point of view, an opinion. What this does now is this opens the door to a solution. Like, you've got my attention. I get that you work with clients like me. I get that you solve the problem that I'm facing. And I really like your take. I like your opinion. I resonate and align with your point of view. And what the prospect now is kind of they're not asking this explicitly, but subconsciously they're wondering, so what do you got? What's the fix here? What's the solution? And how does the solution deliver on your point of view? We call this the results mechanism. Okay, the results mechanism. This is ultimately what you sell. This is your proprietary product, process, methodology by which you help clients go from where they are and the pain that they're experiencing to the results and the outcomes that they want to experience. Notice I didn't say anything about services. Notice I didn't say anything about deliverables or time or effort or materials. Why? No client ever woke up in the morning. A lot of this is based on what clients wake up thinking, okay? No clients ever woke up in the morning and said, I really need a consultant to spend 40 hours on this for me. I really need these deliverables. I really wish someone would write this report. No, clients want one thing and one thing only: results, 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 and then some more results. And so your job here as the consultant is not to articulate a laundry list of services and help the client figure out which services they want and need. That's very lazy and frankly will lose you business. Your job is to articulate a process, a mechanism, if you will, through which the client can get results. They're going to be receptive to this once they align and engage with your point of view, because that's what's going to tell them, I'm in the right place. This person makes sense. I align what they're thinking on the problem, And now I want to see what is their process by which they can help me solve this problem. And we call that the results mechanism. So take Jody again, for example. Jody's got this process she calls the B2B SaaS LTV extender. LTV stands for lifetime value. Okay. So if you're a B2B SaaS company in that $1 to $5 million range, you're struggling with customer churn, you align with her message of it's messaging, not product is the real problem, then she has a process called the B2B SaaS LTV extender by which you can solve that customer churn problem by fixing your messaging and thereby improve the lifetime value of your clients, which is the result and the outcome her clients are looking for. Okay. If you're a B2B consultant and you are struggling to generate pipeline and have conversations and generate leads, and you align with our point of view around, well, it's positioning over prospecting is the real problem, then we have a results mechanism. There's a logo for it in the bottom left corner here called the 90-day pipeline. And what does the 90-day pipeline do? Well, it enables you to solve for client clarity and problem specificity and point of view and the results mechanism and positioning at large. So you can take your new power positioning informed by customer research to LinkedIn and then execute on the LinkedIn strategy to build pipeline. And it's a unique process because most of the folks that you could otherwise work with may help you with the LinkedIn piece. But there aren't many folks out there that can help you with the positioning and the prospecting. Right? And prospecting without positioning is like pouring water into a bucket with a hole at the bottom. You can spend a lot of time and energy prospecting, but you're not going to retain much of that value if your positioning isn't solid. We solve for both. And that's built into our results mechanism called the 90-day pipeline. So for you, what you want to do now is articulate your own proprietary results mechanism, the way through which you help your clients get results and outcomes that builds on the problem that you solves for it ultimately, and aligns with your point of view. Now, what this does, among other things, is this tangibly differentiates you from your competition. All of this differentiates you from your competition. But the results mechanism is kind of one of the focal points of your differentiation, because now you don't have to say, well, I'm different, trust me, because who believes that? Now you can say, well, we have a process that's unlike any other process. I can say, and I will say to you, inside the 90-day pipeline, which I haven't really talked much about today, apart from references here and there, but if I showed it to you, and Pratik and I can show it to you if it makes sense, you will conclude that there's nothing else out there like the 90-day pipeline. It is a unique and proprietary process to solve for positioning and pipeline. And there's nothing else out there like it. Now I'm differentiated. And now you still have a decision to make in that, do I want to do it or not? That's still your decision. But you can't come to me and say, well, I can find something else like it for cheaper. No, you can find something else for cheaper. But it's not quite comparable. And you want to do the same thing for your market. You want to have a unique proprietary results mechanism, an articulation of how you do what you do and how you get the results that you get for clients in a way that cannot be shopped around. It prevents any kind of apples to apples comparison. So clients no longer say, well, we're talking to 3 other firms and they all seem to do something similar to you. So what's your best offer? If you're getting that kind of message, we failed at the positioning exercise and likely at the results mechanism, because they think they can get what you sell somewhere else. In other words, you're right there on that common supply curve with every other competitor, and there's no reason to work with you over and above the competition, let alone pay you a premium. Let's bring it home. Okay. The last piece of the puzzle here is your unique story. Okay. This is a story-based articulation of how you came up with all this. Like, what's the story? Like, how did you figure all this out? How did you come into, because what we're claiming here is that you are uniquely positioned to do this work, but how did you get there? Help me understand this. And by the way, this is not, don't get me wrong. Nobody cares about your story on the front end. So don't start your LinkedIn profile with, well, 10 years ago when I was in corporate, nobody cares. But your story becomes relevant when you've taken me this far on the path. I get that you work with clients like me. You solve the problem that I'm facing. I like your point of view. I like your offer. But how'd you do all this? Like, I get that question all the time. Like, how'd you come up with this? What's the story? Okay. So you do want to have an articulation of your unique story because that makes everything more believable. It makes everything more palatable. Okay. So, in the early days, my story, and the stories evolve, stories shift. My story was, well, I'm one of the few guys in this space that combines like actual consulting pedigree. Like I worked at Ernst & Young, big consulting firm. I ran marketing and business development for a boutique consulting firm, got them to 7 figures from scratch. I've been, boots on the ground, inside consulting businesses for that's all I know. I only know consulting. I don't know anything else. And I kind of accidentally fell into marketing, to be honest. I'm a consultant by trade, rather an accountant by trade. And I used to be a CPA. And then I started consulting, and I never really got any training formally in marketing. I kind of figured it out because I found myself in a role at a consulting firm where I was in charge of marketing and business development. And that made me go and read all the books and find all the websites and yada, yada, yada. And what I found, I'm going back, 10 some odd years now, was there weren't many good resources on marketing for consulting and professional services. And so I kind of had to figure things out on my own. Long story short, ended up launching a consulting practice called Boutique Growth. And initially just started working with clients one-on-one and running their marketing for them, running their business development for them, and helping them build out their positioning. And what I found was, well, there was a playbook here that was working really well for these clients. And I wanted to find a way to get this in the hands of more people. And that's where 6 years ago, 90-Day Pipeline was born. There's a story. And the point of this is not to tell you my story, but there's a story as to how all this came together. Today, the story is more like we've graduated 1,000 clients in the past 6 years. And by the way, that really steps on the long-term benefit of powerful positioning. 6 years ago, when I launched 90-Day Pipeline, I didn't have strong positioning. I mean, yes, I was targeting this audience, and there was something there, and it obviously compelled enough for it to scale and succeed. But today, my positioning is 1,000 times more powerful than it was 6 years ago because I've graduated 1,000 clients and I have a few hundred case studies to show for it. So now I'm one of very few organizations, if any, who have done that volume of work in this space. So your story will evolve. In the beginning, it's about drawing on whatever credibility you have at the time, but that credibility will grow over time and make your positioning that much more powerful. So today, for example, we don't need to sell very hard because we have a story that checks out and a couple hundred case studies that you can review. So I don't need to cajole you into buying. I don't need to high pressure you into buying. I don't need to beg you to buy. I can just demonstrate my credibility, show you the proof, and people buy. And that's the power of positioning in the long run, is it gets stronger and stronger and stronger over time as you do more work within your particular focus and demonstrate more results and build more credibility. Pratik, I'm talking too much today, but I guess that's why they're here, right?
We'll take it.
All right. So Jody's story here, to bring it home, the Jody story, is, when she was at that B2B SaaS company, she was actually in a marketing capacity. And she noticed that this company was having issues with churn and they were losing clients. And so she kind of took it upon herself to be this like renegade marketer and actually start solving for churn problems and retention problems, even though that wasn't really the job of the marketing department, but they didn't have anybody in customer success at the time. So she kind of took it upon herself to solve some of those problems and close those gaps. And in doing so, developed a methodology to do so that she's now bringing to other organizations. Okay. That's very similar to kind of my positioning in the early days when I first launched 90-Day Pipeline 6 years ago. Was back then, what I would say is, well, I've been running marketing and business development for these professional services firms, consulting firms. And, you probably can't afford to pay me $5,000, $10,000 a month to do this for you, but I have a program that can essentially give you the playbook and train you on how to use it. You can implement it yourself. And that was my positioning back then. It's obviously evolved since then. But the point is, you lean into the story that is true and provides you with the credibility and the relevance that you need today. And that story will necessarily evolve over time. Okay. So, quick sip of coffee. We are past the top of the hour. I see most of you are still here. Actually, not many people have left. So I guess we got the time. Let's give you a call to action, and then let's open it up to Q&A. Okay. So here's a call to action. I alluded to this earlier. Pratik and I are essentially blocking some time on our calendars over the next, it's probably going to take about a week to get through all of these, because a lot of folks in this room. We're blocking time on our calendars in the next week to do some one-on-one positioning strategy reviews with you. So what that means is I want you to go through this, the framework that we looked at just now. I want you to start jotting down some notes on your strategy. I want you to think about where you're stuck, where you need some more guidance, need some more insight. And then book a call. And Pratik, can you drop the link to that in the chat for me, please? Book a call. And we're going to do this in 2 steps. One is your initial conversation will be with Pratik, and Pratik's going to essentially ask you a series of, diagnostic questions. They're going to help you develop and see a positioning strategy. So don't feel bad if you're like, I don't really know where to start with this. Like, the conversation with Pratik will help you formulate your ideas for your positioning. So he will ask you a series of questions via a process that him and I have designed together to explore your positioning strategy. And think of it as a brainstorm almost. Like, let's bring some ideas together. Let's kick around some ideas and see how we feel about it. Okay. He will then organize that for me. And I wish I could say that I could offer this to everybody in the room. But for the folks who Pratik feels are, a really good fit and would benefit from a conversation with me, particularly if we feel like we can help you and work together, he will pass you on to me and we'll have a conversation. We'll review that together. I do want to be clear that in none of these conversations with Pratik or myself do we try to close you. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One of them is, if you're going to work with us, I need you to work with us because you want to work with us and because you see value in the work and you see a return on the work. And I don't want to convince you that you should work with us. I want you to convince me, frankly, that you should work with us. So we're not going to try to high pressure you or anything. These are conversations about your positioning and about your business that we are happy to have. And if in doing so, you have a desire to engage us, we'd be happy to have that conversation if we feel like it's a good fit. So 2 parts of this. One is you'll chat with Pratik first. There's a link to book that call with him right there in the chat. And the second is, if he feels like you're a good fit and you're well qualified to work with us, you'll talk to me. In neither case are we trying to high pressure you into anything, but merely trying to get you on the path to solving your positioning and ultimately solving your pipeline problem. So you can grab a call using that link. I will tell you, there's 40 people in the room and we don't have 40 spots in the next few days. So I would go there soon, like now, and grab a spot. I don't think we'll do many of these past mid next week because we have to focus on other things. We've got another workshop coming up in 2 weeks, and we'll shift our focus to that. So we're going to do these probably for the next, I'd say 3 or 4 days, probably till Monday or Tuesday of next week. And I probably don't have 40 spots in that time. So if you want one, I go there now and grab one. Sound good? Okay. Let's open it up. Questions. Pratik, I'll let you moderate and just feed me the questions from the Q&A or the chat, if you don't mind. We can also, oh, by the way, if folks want to come on and actually have a conversation and express their question live, I can bring you on as a panelist and we can have a conversation.
We got a couple raised hands. There were a lot more, but I think they were just accidentally pressed. But then we got a couple of questions as well. So you want to start with questions in the Q&A box?
Yes, please.
Okay, first one is from Karen, and her question is, I imagine the steps are not, can you see it, or do you want me to read it out here?
I can see it now. Yeah. But yeah, go ahead and read it out for folks who are listening.
Yeah, so I imagine the steps are not necessarily linear, but how might the use of these parts of your framework map to the sales process? Question one. Question two is, at what point do you bring in these steps, i.e. larger audiences, one-on-one closing, etc.?
Yeah. So good question. I'll share my screen here again. Okay. So all of this is important and necessary to communicate as part of the lead generation and marketing process. Okay. So when we talk about, positioning unlocks success on LinkedIn, that means that all of this needs to get communicated in some shape or fashion on LinkedIn. In other words, if I come across your profile, and ideally most of it should be on your profile, but in addition to that profile would be some of the content you're publishing. But just from your profile, I better get a sense of who your ideal client is. I better get a sense of what problem you solve. I better get a sense of your point of view. I better see that there's a mechanism, and there should be some reference to your story. Like just in the profile alone, I should get all these elements. And then I should get further understanding of this from your content that you publish. Your content should give me a sense of like, what does this person believe? And content's that's a whole other conversation that we can have here. And I'm gonna make a reference to it briefly. LinkedIn is, I don't need to tell you, flooded with information, flooded with content, flooded with people publishing. And most of it, I probably also need to tell you, is trash. Adding to the noise, not really contributing any kind of original thought leadership or perspectives. And so, our game when it comes to content is like, you will not find anything in our program around hacking the LinkedIn algorithm, right? Or trying to go viral on LinkedIn. Our clients, generally speaking, don't care to go viral. They care to be highly relevant to a small number of people. And that typically means, in terms of vanity metrics, not a lot of likes, not a lot of shares, not a lot of comments, but a lot of revenue. That's who we cater to. And the way that comes together is being extremely original and thoughtful about the perspectives that you share in your content in a way that aligns with the beliefs and the perspectives of your ideal client. And so through that articulation and through the consumption of that content, they should get an appreciation for all of these pillars and come to a conclusion through that you're the right fit to work with them. Okay. And then Karen's asking, at what point do you bring in these steps in the close process? Yeah. So, for example, folks might not get your full results mechanism on LinkedIn. We introduce our results mechanism in the sales process. So for example, if you talk to Pratik, okay, and you say to Pratik, listen, I want to look at 90-day pipeline. I want to know what this thing is and how it works. Pratik will then start to show you this kind of stuff. Right. Well, here's how it works. Here's what we do. Here's the mechanism. You're not going to get a whole lot of this if you're just in our marketing ecosystem. But once you've demonstrated that you're a good qualified fit to work with us, then we'll start educating you on the product and how it works. So that comes typically in the sales process. Cool. Next question.
So I'm scrolling in the original chat here. We had a question from Michael Morris. How do we get convincingly specific on a specific prospect's problem when you have 1,000 of prospects?
Okay, good question. So we're trying to find, when we talk about client clarity, it was a great question. What was the name again, Pratik?
Michael Morris.
Michael, great question. We're trying to find markets with common problems, right? So when we talk about client clarity, we're not arbitrarily choosing a market for the sake of choosing a market. We're trying to choose a market for which the problems that you solve are pervasive. Take Jody as an example, right? Jody's choosing this market in part because she knows through direct firsthand customer research, which I want to talk about it a little bit more in a minute. She knows that this market tends to struggle with this problem. And she's gone out and actually validated that through customer research. So even though there's thousands of clients in this market, she knows this problem is pervasive. And the very high concentration of clients in the market, they're going to have this problem. Same is true for me. I target B2B consultants. Not everybody struggles with lead generation and pipeline, but a whole lot of them do. It's a pervasive enough problem that I don't need to worry about, is there enough demand for this in the market? There's plenty of demand. So you want to choose both markets and problems that are in sufficient concentration, are pervasive enough that you can be fairly confident there's demand for it. And you want to validate this with customer research. And there's a conversation to be had here. Particularly, I'm going to ask you to grab that podcast episode on customer research for me and drop that in the chat. When you work with us inside 90-day pipeline, the way that we help you develop your positioning is not by, you and us talking about your positioning, coming up with some hypotheses and sharing our opinions, because that's very risky. We help you ground your decisions on positioning in firsthand customer research. In other words, we want to make sure we make these decisions and build this framework in a way that is rooted and grounded in what we got from the market, what our customers are actually saying, the language they're using, the pain points they're professing. And so within the client clarity stage here, we equip you and train you on a methodology by which you can go out and get that firsthand customer research and gather the data on their pain points, their challenges, their struggles, the language they're using to describe those pain points, etc., and then use that data to inform your positioning, and then validate your positioning by taking it back to prospective clients that you interviewed and essentially putting offers in front of them until they buy. And so Pratik shared a podcast episode here that I highly recommend. It's required. I'll pull it up here. So it's in our program. This episode is required listening. We make our clients listen to this episode. This is an interview between myself and our customer research coach inside 90-day pipeline. Her name is Anna Lasky, where her and I go through the how-to of customer research. How does it work? Why is it important? What are the right things to do? What are the mistakes to avoid? So you can go through that. I'm sure it'll be useful to you, but I do want to make clear that, we don't just come up with this stuff and hope it works. We want to ground these decisions in firsthand customer research. That's how we ensure this is all relevant to the people that we're trying to serve. What else you got there, Pratik?
Well, I think that addresses Kendra's question. She had asked, how do we confirm that we describe the problem in the language that resonates with the ideal client? Firsthand customer research.
Yeah, exactly. So it's almost like it's the opposite. We don't want to come up with something and then confirm it. We want to do the research first to inform our positioning. So we're grounding everything in firsthand customer research. I'll tell you what we do quite candidly. If you hop on a call with Pratik, okay, we are recording that call. We are transcribing that call. We are running that call through several AI prompts, right? And we are mining all of those conversations for what they call voice of customer. We are trying to grab and find the specific things that you say to describe the problems that you're facing so we can use those specific references in our marketing. Because what we found, and it's not just us, this is true for marketing at large, is the best marketing reflects the voice of the customer back to them. And so we have a whole process of doing this, and we'll train you on a simpler process to do this for yourself. But this is the backbone of great marketing, is being able to capture the specific voice of your customer and repeat that back to them to establish this instant resonance.
We got another question in the Q&A from Mr. or Mrs. Unknown. You want to check that out? I can read it out here. My previous client base has been pretty diverse, web design and development. How can I look back at my work with them to determine client clarity, problem specificity, etc.? because in a way it feels all over the place.
Yeah. So resist the temptation to try to find, and this is a very common scenario, by the way, where you have fairly diverse client base, fairly diverse experiences. It's a highly typical scenario. Resist the urge to try to find the themes or the connection points that bring everything together, because you're probably then going to be relevant to nobody. Instead, go into the specifics. So I would look at, which projects were most interesting to you? Which ones did you enjoy the most? Which ones were, the best in terms of results and outcomes? Which ones paid the more? I'd look at them as individual examples and case studies, and then assess, if I had more of these clients and I had more of this work, would I be happy? Would that make for a good business? And then you can start to reverse engineer your positioning from individual examples as opposed to looking at it as an aggregate.
Well, another one just came in here in the Q&A. I have client clarity, problem specificity, and results mechanism, but I see weak areas in the language that sounds better than what my clients has said, point of view and unique story. I've done this work by working with different coaches and consultants. Do you recommend or even require that someone like me goes through all the pillars of your program?
So we need to take you through the process, but if you've done some of the legwork on this stuff already and you have good data, and that's what we'll kind of challenge you on, is how good is your data? I don't want to take your word for it, but if you have good data and good voice of customer, then we can build on that. So our program it's not about necessarily taking you through every single step because we have to. It's about closing in the gaps where the gaps exist. So if you have certain pieces of the puzzle already established, I mean, we need to be confident that that was done effectively. So that we'll have to go through that exercise to assess that. But if they are effectively executed on, then we can plug those pieces in and then fill in the gaps. And I know we're coming up on the half-hour mark, but I'm good to hang out, folks, and finish the questions. So feel free to drop off if you've got to, but we'll get through the questions and then we'll wrap up. Was there anything else, Pratik, or?
Yeah, there was a couple earlier on in the webinar chat box. Let me just go find them here.
Yeah, and I'll just remind you folks to, I was actually looking at, I'm going to recopy that link that Pratik shared to grab a call with him.
Here, I got it. Sorted
Yeah,
copy.
that's not pasting for some reason for me. Yeah, I remind you to, if you haven't yet grabbed your call with Pratik to go through the positioning strategy review, go ahead and do that.
Okay, a couple of questions for you. I dropped it in the chat box.
Go ahead.
So one is from Kendra again. How do I prove I am an expert in this space when I haven't gone out on my own before? I'm trying to take my corporate experience to the SMB world. I don't feel confident calling myself an expert when I don't have testimonials yet for my first clients.
Okay, great question. This is a mindset problem. Now, let me be clear about one thing. If you don't have the corporate experience, and and this is not true for you. What's the name of the questioner again? Sorry, Pratik.
Kendra.
Kendra, like, if you were just starting out in your career and you hadn't worked a day in your life and you're entering the workforce, you're not an expert. Yeah, that's the reality of it, right? However, don't discount your relevant experience in corporate. Like, every consultant at some point was not a consultant. Like, everybody had to start somewhere. Most of our clients, by the way, like, there are professional consultants, people that come from McKinsey and Bain and BCG, et cetera. And actually, they're the ones, to be frank, we're having an honest conversation, they're the ones who struggle the most in independent consulting. For the reasons I mentioned earlier, because they're stuck in this kind of like management consultant mindset where they're trying to be all things to all people, because that's what worked at the big firm. And they have a hard time unlearning those things. You know who makes the best consultants and the ones who tend to get the best results as independent solo consultants? It's former corporate people. Because the McKinsey, Bain, BCG, Deloitte person, they've never really been in the trenches. They've never really run a department, organization, executed on a function. The corporate folks have been there. They've been in the trenches. And clients like that. That lends you a ton of credibility because you've actually done the thing inside an organization that you're going to help them with. And that lends you a ton of credibility. Yes, will you have more credibility in 5 years when you have 10 client case studies to show for it? Absolutely, you will. Yes. But you've got to begin with the credibility that you have. So, like I mentioned earlier, right? When I first started consulting, I leaned on the credibility I had running marketing and business development as an employee of a consulting firm. That was my credibility. And I leveraged that to get more clients that I could run marketing for. And then I did that. And then I launched 90 Day Pipeline. And in launching 90 Day Pipeline, I leveraged my credibility in helping multiple organizations run their marketing and business development. And then I launched 90 Day Pipeline. And today, I leverage my credibility having graduated over 1,000 consultants through the program. So the story evolves, but you have to start by leveraging the credibility that you have, and corporate experience absolutely makes you credible. Unless you've never done the thing that you're trying to help clients with, in which case, that's a problem. That's not going to be very effective. But assuming you've done this work in a corporate setting, there's credibility there that you have to articulate and own. And yes, it'll get stronger when you have more clients and case studies. Absolutely. What else, Pratik?
We have another question from Anonymous. Basically kind of asking to talk about pricing strategies.
Anonymous is really chatty today.
Yeah.
So it's hard to talk about pricing strategies without a whole lot of context. I mean, at the end of the day, like the way that we approach pricing inside 90 Day Pipeline is we need to build the results mechanism. And then we need to quantify the value of that results mechanism for a specific client and price accordingly. And if we do our positioning work right, as we talked about it today, we absolutely should be able to command a premium price. Without getting into the specifics of your offer and without having done the positioning work, it's kind of hard to talk about pricing. So I'm gonna have to defer that to, that's a 90 Day Pipeline question.
I got a good question from Melissa, and I get this question a lot as well on the front end, but she had asked, I have a hard time creating the methodology and naming it because I feel like it's very customized for the client. How do you move through this?
Yeah. By making it less customized. So first of all, if we don't have the first 3 pieces of this puzzle figured out, then the results mechanism becomes an impossible exercise. All right. Each of these builds on each other, right? So even if you don't have client clarity and problem specificity, good luck formulating a point of view. On what? For whom? It's an impossible exercise. And if you don't have client clarity and problem specificity and a point of view, good luck creating a results mechanism, because I don't know how to create a mechanism for everybody. And I don't know how to create a mechanism that is very broad based in its applicability. So this exercise requires you to be narrow on who the client is, what problem you solve, and how you're going to solve it. If you solve for those 3, the results mechanism should be a fairly straightforward exercise, but a common challenge, if you can't figure that out, is because there's something not quite right down here.
Solid. I think that's all the questions. Well, might have someone here. Yeah, I think that was most of the questions.
Cool. Folks, last thing I'm going to ask you to do, if you would indulge us, is if you enjoyed today's workshop, I'm going to ask you to go to our Trustpilot page. So first of all, make sure you grab that call with Pratik if you want to get, our eyes on your positioning and have a more specific conversation about, your particular business. go and do that. That's the first thing. The link is there in the chat. Second thing is, if you enjoyed today's workshop, it's really helpful to us to get your review on the workshop. It encourages more people to, people are skeptical, right? Like, oh, what am I going to go on this thing? It's going to be a big pitch fest. I'm not going to learn anything. So, and if that was the case, then I apologize, right? But hopefully there was some value here for you. And I'd love for you to go on Trustpilot. I dropped the link there in the chat, and leave us a review of your experience on the workshop. Talk a little bit about the value that you got. Keep it short and sweet to keep it efficient for your time. Not looking for an essay, but a quick review on there would certainly help us, and we'd appreciate it. Cool. Am I missing anything, Pratik? Are we good to go?
I think we're good to go.
If we end up chatting with you, whether it's Pratik or myself, looking forward to the chat. If this is end of the road here for our conversation, it was a real pleasure spending time with you today. Appreciate you giving us your attention, and we wish you all the best.
Take care, everyone.
And we will, by the way, the same link that you use to attend this call, you can use to get the recording. So you already have the recording, just use the same link to access it. All right. Have a good one. Take care.